When 8-year-old Emma started coming home with bruises she couldn't explain, her father David knew something was terribly wrong at school. But what he discovered next would change their lives forever. David Martinez worked as a mechanic at the local garage. His hands were always dirty with oil, but his heart was clean and full of love for his daughter Emma. She was his whole world. After her mother left them 2 years ago, it was just the two of them against everything. Emma used to be the happiest little girl in the neighborhood. She would run to greet David every evening, telling him stories about her day at school. She loved drawing pictures and singing songs, but 3 weeks ago everything changed. It started small. Emma stopped eating her favorite breakfast cereal. She would push the bowl away and say her stomach hurt. David thought maybe she was getting sick. Then she started asking strange questions. "Daddy, if I'm not good, will you still love me?" Emma asked one morning while David was making her lunch. David stopped what he was doing and knelt down beside her. "Emma, sweetheart, you are always good, and I will always love you no matter what." But Emma just looked at the floor. Her small hands were shaking. Every morning became a battle. Emma would cry and beg not to go to school. "Please, Daddy, can I stay home today? My tummy hurts really bad." David would check her temperature, but she never had a fever. He would ask what was wrong at school, but Emma would just shake her head and say nothing was wrong. The worst part was the bruises. David first noticed them on Emma's arms, small finger marks that looked like someone had grabbed her too hard. When he asked about them, Emma said she fell down during recess. "Kids fall down all the time," David told himself. But deep in his heart, he knew something else was happening. Emma stopped laughing. She stopped drawing pictures. At night, David would hear her crying softly in her room. When he would go to check on her, she would pretend to be asleep. One night, Emma had a terrible nightmare. She was screaming and crying in her sleep. David rushed to her room and gently woke her up. "It's okay, baby. Daddy's here. You were just having a bad dream." Emma threw her arms around his neck and held on tight. "Daddy, in my dream, someone took me away and you couldn't find me." David's heart broke. He held his daughter close and promised her that would never happen. But Emma pulled back and looked at him with scared eyes. "Daddy, if I tell you something, promise they won't take you away from me." "What do you mean, sweetheart? No one will ever take me away from you." But Emma just shook her head. "She said if I tell anyone, they will take you away forever. Then I'll be all alone." David felt cold fear run through his body. "Who said that, Emma? Who told you that?" But Emma wouldn't answer. She just buried her face in his chest and cried. The next morning, David watched Emma get ready for school. She moved slowly, like she was walking to something terrible. Her little backpack seemed too heavy for her small shoulders. "Emma, are you sure everything is okay at school? Is someone being mean to you?" Emma stopped walking and turned to look at him. For just a moment, David thought she was going to tell him everything. But then she shook her head. "Everything is fine, Daddy. I just don't like school anymore." David drove Emma to school that morning with a heavy heart. As he watched her walk through the school gates, he made a decision. He couldn't let this continue. Something was hurting his little girl, and he was going to find out what it was. That day at work, David couldn't concentrate. His boss asked him 3 times if he was feeling okay. All David could think about was Emma's scared face and the bruises on her arms. He knew in his heart that his daughter was in danger, and if the school wouldn't tell him what was happening, he would have to find out another way. David decided to visit Emma's school the next day. He needed answers, and he wasn't leaving until he got them. Roosevelt Elementary School looked normal from the outside. Children were playing in the playground, and teachers were walking around with friendly smiles. But David felt something was wrong the moment he stepped inside. He went straight to the main office and asked to speak with Emma's teacher, Ms. Rodriguez. The secretary told him to wait in the hallway. When Ms. Rodriguez finally came out, David was shocked. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a cold expression. Her smile looked fake, like she was wearing a mask. "Mr. Martinez, what can I do for you?" Ms. Rodriguez asked, but her voice had no warmth in it. "I'm worried about Emma. She's been acting strange lately, and I found some bruises on her arms. Is everything okay at school?" Ms. Rodriguez crossed her arms and looked annoyed. "Emma is a difficult child, Mr. Martinez. She doesn't listen well and often disturbs other students. Sometimes children need firm discipline to learn proper behavior." David felt anger rising in his chest. "What do you mean by firm discipline?" "I mean that Emma needs to learn respect and obedience. Perhaps at home you are too soft with her. Children need structure and consequences when they misbehave." David stared at this woman who was supposed to be caring for his daughter. Everything about her felt wrong. Her words were cold, and her eyes showed no care for children. "I want to speak with the principal," David said firmly. Ms. Rodriguez's fake smile got bigger. "Of course, but I'm sure Principal Johnson will tell you the same thing. Emma needs to learn better behavior." Principal Johnson was a nervous-looking man who kept wiping sweat from his forehead. When David explained his concerns, the principal seemed uncomfortable. "Mr. Martinez, I assure you that all our teachers are professionals. Ms. Rodriguez has been teaching here for many years. If Emma is having adjustment problems, perhaps we could discuss some strategies to help her." But David noticed that Principal Johnson wouldn't look him in the eyes. And when David asked specific questions about what happened in Emma's classroom, the principal gave vague answers. After leaving the school, David felt more worried than before. Something was definitely wrong, but the adults at the school were protecting each other instead of protecting the children. David decided to talk to other parents. Maybe their children had similar problems. He found Mrs. Thompson at the grocery store. Her son Jake was in Emma's class. "Hi, Mrs. Thompson, I wanted to ask you about Jake's teacher, Ms. Rodriguez. How does Jake like her?" Mrs. Thompson's face changed immediately. She looked around nervously, like she was afraid someone might hear them. "Why are you asking?" she whispered. "Emma has been having some problems at school, and I'm trying to understand what's happening." Mrs. Thompson moved closer and spoke very quietly. "Jake has nightmares about the angry teacher. But Mr. Martinez, you didn't hear this from me. Some parents who complained before, they had problems. Their children were moved to different schools, and one father even lost his job." David felt his heart sink. "What kind of problems?" "I can't say more, but be careful. Ms. Rodriguez has friends in high places. The school board protects her." That evening, David sat in his living room thinking about everything he had learned. The school was covering something up, other parents were scared to speak, and his little girl was suffering in silence. David knew he needed proof of what was happening to Emma, but how could he get evidence when everyone was too scared to talk? Then he remembered something he had seen on the internet, small recording devices that parents used to check on babysitters. They were tiny and could record for hours. David felt uncomfortable about the idea of secret recording, but then he thought about Emma's tears and the bruises on her arms. He thought about her nightmares and her fear. His daughter needed protection, and he was the only one who could give it to her. Late that night, David ordered a small audio recording device online. It was so tiny, it could fit in a pencil case or backpack pocket. The description said it could record for 8 hours, and the sound quality was very clear. As he clicked the purchase button, David whispered a promise to his sleeping daughter. "I'm going to find out what's happening to you, baby, and I'm going to make it stop." 3 days later, the small package arrived at David's house. Inside was a recording device no bigger than a quarter. David's hands shook as he read the instructions. That morning, David woke up extra early. Emma was still sleeping, and her backpack was sitting by the front door. David carefully opened the small front pocket and placed the recording device inside. Hidden under some tissues, his heart was beating fast. He felt like he was doing something wrong, but he also knew he had to protect his daughter. When Emma came to breakfast, she looked tired and scared, just like every morning for the past month. "Good morning, Princess," David said, trying to sound normal. Emma barely looked at him. She pushed her cereal around in the bowl but didn't eat any. "Emma, you need to eat something before school." "I'm not hungry, Daddy." David knelt down beside her chair. "Sweetheart, I know something is bothering you. You can tell me anything. I love you no matter what." For a moment, Emma's eyes filled with tears. David thought she was going to tell him everything, but then she shook her head. "Nothing is wrong, Daddy. I just don't like breakfast anymore." David helped Emma put on her backpack, being extra careful not to disturb the recording device. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure Emma could hear it. "Why are you checking my backpack, Daddy?" Emma asked. David's mouth went dry. "I just want to make sure you have everything you need for school." Emma looked at him with curious eyes, but she didn't ask any more questions. The drive to school felt like the longest drive of David's life. Every red light seemed to last forever. Emma sat quietly in the back seat, staring out the window with sad eyes. At the school gate, David gave Emma an extra long hug. "I love you so much, Emma. Remember that, okay?" Emma nodded and walked slowly toward the school building. David watched until she disappeared inside, then drove to work with his stomach full of knots. All day long, David couldn't concentrate on anything. He kept looking at the clock, wondering what was happening to Emma. His co-workers asked him several times if he was feeling sick. "I'm fine," David lied, but he wasn't fine. He was terrified of what he might discover when he listened to that recording. At lunchtime, David sat in his car and called the school. "I just wanted to check on Emma Martinez. Is she having a good day?" The secretary's voice was cheerful. "Oh yes, Mr. Martinez. All the children are doing well today." But David didn't believe her. He had heard that fake cheerfulness before. The afternoon went by like slow torture. David watched the clock tick minute by minute. He tried to work on fixing cars, but his hands were shaking too much. Finally, it was time to pick up Emma from school. David drove there faster than he should have. When Emma came out of the school building, David's heart broke. She looked worse than she had that morning. Her face was pale and her eyes were red, like she had been crying. "Hi, sweetheart. How was your day?" Emma climbed into the car without saying anything. She buckled her seatbelt and stared out the window. "Emma, did anything happen at school today?" "No, Daddy. Nothing happened." But David could see that something terrible had happened. Emma's hands were shaking and she kept wiping her eyes. During dinner, Emma barely ate anything. She just moved the food around on her plate and asked to go to bed early. David helped Emma get ready for bed, and when she was brushing her teeth, he carefully took the recording device out of her backpack. After Emma was asleep, David sat in his home office with the small device in his hands. He was scared to listen to it, but he knew he had to. David connected the device to his computer and put on headphones. He took a deep breath and clicked play. What he heard in the next few minutes would change everything. The first sounds David heard were normal classroom noises. Children talking, papers rustling, chairs moving. Then he heard Emma's sweet voice answering a math question. But everything changed when he heard Ms. Rodriguez speak. "Emma Martinez, stand up right now!" The teacher's voice was sharp and angry. David heard Emma's chair scrape against the floor. "You gave the wrong answer again. How many times do I have to tell you that stupid children like you need to think before they speak?" David's hands clenched into fists. No teacher should ever speak to a child that way. "I'm sorry, Miss Rodriguez," Emma's small voice said. "Sorry doesn't fix your stupidity," the teacher snapped back. "Hold out your hands." David heard a sharp slapping sound, then Emma crying softly. "Stop crying immediately. Crying is for babies, and you're supposed to be a big girl." David had to pause the recording. His whole body was shaking with anger, but he knew he had to keep listening. The recording continued with more terrible moments. Ms. Rodriguez calling Emma stupid, worthless, and a disappointment. David heard his daughter apologizing over and over, even when she had done nothing wrong. But the worst part came during lunchtime. "Emma, come here," Ms. Rodriguez said in a quiet, dangerous voice. David heard footsteps, then the teacher speaking very close to the recording device. "I saw you talking to your father yesterday morning. Did you tell him anything about our classroom?" "No, Ms. Rodriguez. I didn't say anything." "Good. Because if you ever tell your father or anyone else about what happens here, something very bad will happen to him." David's blood turned to ice. "Your father will lose his job. Then the police will come and take him away because I'll tell them he's a bad man. You'll never see him again, and you'll have to live in a scary place with strangers who don't love you." Emma was crying now. "Please don't take my daddy away. He's all I have." "Then you better keep your mouth shut. If you tell anyone about our special classroom rules, your daddy will disappear forever. Do you understand?" "Yes, Ms. Rodriguez, I understand. And Emma, if you cry at home or act sad, your father will ask questions. So you better learn to act happy, or I'll make sure you never see him again." David had to stop the recording again. He felt sick to his stomach. This evil woman had been terrorizing his daughter and threatening to destroy their family. The recording went on for hours. David heard Ms. Rodriguez yelling at other children too. She called them names, threatened them, and made them cry. But Emma seemed to get the worst treatment. Near the end of the school day, David heard the most heartbreaking part. "Class dismissed. Everyone except Emma can go." David heard the other children leaving, then silence. "Emma, you were especially stupid today. Hold out your hands again. Slap! Slap!" David heard Emma crying. "Tomorrow you better do better, or the punishment will be worse. And remember, if your father finds out about this, he'll disappear forever, and it will be all your fault." "I won't tell, Ms. Rodriguez. Please don't hurt my daddy. Get out of my sight." David heard Emma gathering her backpack and running out of the classroom. When the recording finally ended, David sat in his office crying. His poor little girl had been living in terror for weeks, too scared to ask for help because she thought it would destroy their family. David felt rage like he had never felt before. This woman had been torturing his daughter and using threats to keep her silent. But now David had proof, clear, undeniable proof of what Ms. Rodriguez was doing. David made several copies of the recording and saved them in different places. Then he called his best friend, Mark. "Mark, I need your help. Something terrible has been happening to Emma at school, and I have evidence. Can you come over right now?" "I'll be there in 10 minutes, Mark said without hesitation. David looked toward Emma's bedroom where she was sleeping. "Don't worry, baby," he whispered. "Daddy's going to make sure that woman never hurts you again." Mark arrived at David's house within 10 minutes. David played the recording for his best friend, and Mark's face turned red with anger. "This is child abuse, David. Pure and simple. You have to go to the police right now." "What if they don't? Believe me? What if the school covers it up like they've been doing?" Mark stood up and paced around the room. "You have hours of evidence. This recording proves everything. No one can deny what's on here." Early the next morning, David called in sick to work and drove to the police station. Detective Sarah Chen listened to parts of the recording, and her face became very serious. "Mr. Martinez, this is definitely child abuse and criminal threats. We'll start an investigation immediately." But when Detective Chen called the school, Principal Johnson claimed the recording was illegal and couldn't be trusted. "Mr. Martinez is an unstable single father who's trying to cause trouble for our excellent teacher," Principal Johnson told the detective. Detective Chen hung up the phone and looked at David with frustration. "The school is going to fight this. They're claiming you illegally recorded conversations without permission." David felt his heart sink. "So they can just keep hurting children because I don't have legal permission to protect my daughter?" "I didn't say that. The recording is still evidence of serious crimes, but this is going to be a difficult case." That afternoon, David decided to contact the local news. He called Channel 7 News and spoke with reporter Lisa Martinez, no relation. "Mr. Martinez, if what you're telling me is true, this is a very important story. Can you bring the recording to our station tonight? David met with Lisa Martinez that evening. When she heard the recording, she was shocked. This is horrific. We're going to run this story tomorrow night. The public needs to know what's happening to children at Roosevelt Elementary. The next evening, the news story aired. David watched as his voice and Emma's story were shared with thousands of people. The phone number for the police station appeared on the screen, asking other parents to call if their children had similar experiences. Within an hour, the police station received over 50 phone calls from parents. Many had similar stories about Ms. Rodriguez, but their children had been too scared to tell them what was happening. Mrs. Thompson called David that night. "I saw the news story. Jake told me everything after he saw it. Ms. Rodriguez has been hurting him too, but she threatened to have me arrested if he ever told anyone." More parents came forward over the next few days. The police collected statements from 12 different families. All their children had been abused by Ms. Rodriguez, and all had been threatened to keep quiet. Principal Johnson tried to defend Ms. Rodriguez in a statement to the press. "Ms. Rodriguez is a dedicated teacher who maintains discipline in her a classroom. These accusations are from troubled families trying to blame the school for their children's behavior problems." But the evidence was overwhelming. The police had recordings, witness statements, and even found other parents who had secretly recorded similar abuse. Ms. Rodriguez was arrested on a Friday morning. David watched the news as she was led away in handcuffs. For the first time in weeks, he felt hope, but the fight wasn't over. The school board called an emergency meeting and tried to transfer Ms. Rodriguez to another school instead of firing her. David and the other parents organized a protest. Outside the school board meeting, over 200 people showed up with signs demanding justice for their children. "Our children deserve to feel safe at school," David shouted into a microphone. "No child should ever be afraid to learn." The crowd cheered and chanted, "Protect our children, fire Rodriguez." Local news stations covered the protest, and the story spread across social media. Parents from other schools began sharing their own stories of teacher abuse. The pressure became too much for the school board to ignore. 3 days after the protest, they announced that Ms. Rodriguez would be permanently fired and could never work in any school again. Principal Johnson was also fired for covering up the abuse and failing to protect the children in his school. David received calls from parents in other cities who had similar problems. He realized that Emma's story had started something much bigger than just one classroom. "We can't let this happen to other children," David told Mark. "We have to make sure schools everywhere know that parents are watching, and we won't stay quiet. When our children are being hurt, the fight for justice was just beginning, but David knew they were winning." 3 months later, Ms. Rodriguez was sentenced to 2 years in prison for child abuse and criminal threats. She was also banned from ever working with children again. David sat in the courtroom with Emma and 12 other families as the judge read the sentence. "The evidence in this case shows a pattern of systematic abuse and psychological terrorism directed at young children," Judge Williams said. "The defendant used her position of authority to inflict emotional and physical harm on students who trusted her to keep them safe." Emma squeezed David's hand as Ms. Rodriguez was led away. For the first time in months, David saw his daughter smile. Outside the courthouse, David was approached by reporter Lisa Martinez. "Mr. Martinez, your courage to speak up has helped protect hundreds of children. How does it feel to see justice served?" David looked down at Emma, who was talking happily with other children whose families had been through the same ordeal. "It feels like we can finally breathe again," David said. "But this isn't just about one teacher or one school. This is about making sure all children know they can speak up when someone hurts them." The case had attracted national attention. David received calls from parents across the country who had similar experiences. Many had been too afraid to speak up until they saw Emma's story. A new organization was formed called Safe Classrooms for All Children. David became one of the founding board members, helping other parents navigate the system when their children faced abuse at school. The school district was forced to implement new safety measures. All classrooms now had cameras, and teachers were required to complete yearly training on appropriate discipline methods. Emma started seeing a counselor to help her recover from the trauma she had experienced. Dr. Patricia Hughes specialized in helping children who had been abused by teachers. Emma is a very brave little girl, Dr. Hughes told David after their first session. She's been carrying a heavy burden, but now that the truth is out, she can start healing. Slowly, Emma began to return to her normal, happy self. She started eating breakfast again and stopped having nightmares. Most importantly, she learned that speaking up about abuse was not something to be ashamed of. "Daddy, I'm glad you found out what Ms. Rodriguez was doing," Emma said one evening while they were making dinner together. "I was so scared that if I told you, something bad would happen to you." David knelt down and hugged his daughter. "Emma, I want you to promise me something. If anyone ever hurts you or makes you feel scared, you tell me immediately. My job is to protect you, and I will never let anyone take me away from you." Emma nodded seriously. "I promise, Daddy." 6 months after Ms. Rodriguez was sentenced, Emma started 3rd grade with a new teacher, Mrs. Patterson. She was kind and patient, everything a teacher should be. On Emma's first day with Mrs. Patterson, David walked her to the classroom. "Are you nervous, sweetheart?" Emma thought for a moment. "A little bit, but I know that if anything bad happens, I can tell you and you'll help me." "That's right, Princess. And remember, most teachers are good people who want to help children learn and grow." Emma hugged David goodbye and skipped into her new classroom with confidence. David kept the small recording device in his desk drawer at home, not as a reminder of the nightmare they had survived, but as proof that sometimes parents have to fight for their children's safety. The story of Emma and Ms. Rodriguez was featured in parenting magazines and child safety websites. David hoped that other parents would learn from their experience and know that they should always trust their instincts when something seems wrong. A year later, David received a letter from a mother in Texas. She had read Emma's story online and found the courage to investigate when her son started showing similar signs of abuse. She discovered that her son's teacher was also hurting children, and she was able to stop it before more children were harmed. "Your daughter's bravery saved my son," the mother wrote. "Thank you for showing us that parents must never give up fighting for their children." David showed the letter to Emma, who was now thriving in 4th grade. "See, sweetheart? By being brave and telling the truth, you helped protect other children too." Emma smiled proudly. "I'm glad other kids don't have to be scared like I was." Every morning when Emma runs to catch the school bus with a smile on her face, David knows that every moment of their fight was worth it. And he keeps that small recording device as a reminder that sometimes the smallest actions can create the biggest changes.